100 million sunflowers, in the middle of a desert. Not in the fertile fields of Ukraine, not in Russia's black soil, but in the burning sands of the Sahel, where even millet struggles to grow. Sounds insane. That's exactly what the world said until the flowers bloomed. In 2027, Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't announce a war. Aku, ora foreign loan. He declared a planting, a revolution in seeds, 300,000 hectares of dead land, reborn in yellow, and the promise 1.5 million tons of oil-rich seeds every year, enough to feed West Africa and then some. But don't be fooled by the beauty. This isn't just agriculture. It's resistance. It's war by other means. Because for decades, Africa didn't own its oil, its gold, or its grain. Now, it dares to own the sun. But will the world allow it? 100 million sunflowers blooming, not in the rich farmlands of Europe, but in the cracked, blistered heart of the Sahel, where wells run dry, where millet barely survives, where for generations, mothers have buried hope beneath the dust, and now an ocean of gold, not in Ukraine, not in Russia, but here, in Burkina Faso. In early 2027, the world gasped when Captain Ibrahim Traoré made his announcement: no weapons, no foreign aid, no loan from the IMF. Instead, a challenge to history itself. His government would plant 100 million sunflowers across 300,000 hectares of desert land. The goal to harvest 1.5 million tons of seeds a year, to feed West Africa, to produce cooking oil, to take what was dead and make it bloom. And for once, the people did not laugh. They listened. In village near Wahiguya, men dropped their tools to watch tractors roll into the sands. Children scattered seeds by hand, their bare feet kicking dust into the air. One radio host called it the rebirth of the soil. An elder in Dori whispered, "We thought the desert would bury us, but now, maybe we will bury the past." It was more than a planting. It was a statement. From the skies, drones captured endless yellow carpets where only thorns once grew. Satellite images from NASA confirmed it. The Sahel was turning gold. The footage spread fast. Across West Africa, people watched the news with disbelief and pride. The desert, that unforgiving stretch of heat and hunger, now shimmered like a field of fire. "This is not farming," said one official at the launch ceremony. "This is resistance. This is sovereignty in bloom." But not everyone believed. Urban elites in Ouagadougou sneered on TV panels. Flowers won't feed a country. Foreign journalists called it romantic nonsense. Agricultural experts warned, the Sahel cannot support such crops. The sun will kill them before they grow. And then came the whispers of fear. Sunflowers need water and lots of it. In the first fragile weeks, irrigation trucks roared through villages, drawing from ancient boreholes. Farmers remembered other promises abandoned after the funding dried up. Some asked how long until these flowers fade like all the rest. Yet, something was different. In Kaya, women formed cooperatives to weed and water. In Seba, teenagers carried water tanks on donkey carts. Local radio blasted jingles. Cook with the sun. Oil from our soil. At night, mothers told stories to their children beneath the stars, not of leaving for Europe, but of staying to build. "We were told, nothing grows here," said a farmer named Salif. But look, the land was only waiting for someone to believe. Still, doubt lingered. And so did memory. The Sahel has seen many projects, all with big promises and bigger failures. From foreign-funded dams to imported rice schemes, the result was often the same: wealth for the few, dust for the many. This time, the people dared to hope, but they also knew better than to trust blindly. One young girl, no older than 10, stood in a patch of sunflowers with a metal bucket. When asked what she was doing, she answered simply, "Feeding my future." That sentence echoed louder than any speech. In markets, the mood was mixed. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a distraction. But no one could deny what they saw: yellow, where there had only been brown. Growth, where there had been grief. The question now was not whether the flowers were real. They were. The question that haunted every dusty village, every weary elder, every watching neighbor was deeper, sharper. Why sunflowers? And why now? Why sunflowers? Why now? Of all the crops that could have been chosen, sorghum, millet, cassava, even cotton. Why did Captain Ibrahim Traoré place the nation's hopes on a flower more commonly found in Eastern Europe than in West Africa? The answer, as always, lies in crisis and strategy. In 2022, when war erupted between Russia and Ukraine, the world's cooking oil supply shattered overnight. These two countries, together, had supplied over half of the planet's sunflower oil. Ships stopped sailing. Silos were shelled. Prices soared by over 60% in just months. For Africa, the impact was brutal. In Ouagadougou, market shelves emptied. A liter of imported oil became a luxury. Mothers rationed meals. Street vendors shut down. Families went hungry, not for lack of land, but for lack of control. Burkina Faso, like most nations in the Sahel, had spent decades importing what it could grow. That was the legacy of colonization, exporting raw goods, importing survival. Captain Traoré's government had seen enough. We will no longer beg for oil. Et déclared, we will press it ourselves. That declaration was not just economic, it was revolutionary. A 2026 FAO report had shown the truth. Sunflower oil is a $2 billion global market and growing fast. With palm oil under scrutiny for its environmental toll, and animal fats facing rejection from health-conscious buyers, sunflower oil had emerged as the clean, heart-friendly alternative. Across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, demand surged. Bottles labeled organic and non-GMO flew off shelves. Prices hit historic highs. For Burkina Faso, trapped in cycles of cotton exports and gold mines owned by outsiders, this was the crack in the system. Ad or left Ager, an opportunity. But there was more. The sunflower, unlike soy or palm, offered multiple values. Its seeds pressed into oil, its husks burned for fuel, its stalks turned into paper and construction board, its seed cake fed livestock. Nothing was wasted. Every part of the plant could power a new industry. And still the choice was not only about function, it was about symbolism. Traoré understood that Africa's battle was never just about food or money. It was about narrative. For too long, the Sahel had been framed in famine, drought, desperation. The global image was one of failure. Traoré wanted new pictures. Yellow fields, women pressing oil in cooperatives, children playing where hunger once ruled. In speeches, he invoked the sunflower as a metaphor. It follows the sun, he said. It does not bow. It lifts its head. That image caught fire. In classrooms, children draw flowers labeled liberty. On social media, young Burkinabe posted photos in golden fields with captions like Africa does not beg, it blooms. In mosques, imams compared the flower's devotion to the sun with faith's devotion to God. But the boldness of the plan stirred enemies as well as pride. Leaked cabinet documents later revealed that other crops were considered soybeans, sesame, even palm oil. But it was the sunflower that won, not just because of profit margins, but because of global visibility. Ukraine's fields had once been Europe's breadbasket. Now, Traoré was claiming that mantle for the Sahel, that alone was a threat. Western analysts scoffed. The Sahel cannot match European yields. Environmentalists warned about irrigation stress. Economists cautioned against monocropping. Critics, both foreign and domestic, asked whether Africa was setting itself up to fail again. But in the villages, belief grew with the blossoms. If you believe this is what Africa needed all along, say Amen in the comments below. Pilot farms showed yields rivaling European levels 2 tons per hectare. Solar pumps slashed irrigation costs. Regional trade deals promised new markets. And above all, dignity began to sprout where dependency had once taken root. Still, the deeper question remained. Sunflowers were rising. Oil was coming. But in a continent long exploited, wealth had a way of slipping away. Who would own the Sahel's golden harvest? The people or the powers circling with contracts in hand? The sunflowers grew fast. Too fast for some to believe. From Dori to Gawa, golden waves rippled across the desert like something out of a dream. Where there had once been only cracked clay and dust devils, now stood millions of stalks, swaying beneath a relentless sun. The air smelled different. The people walked different. Even the birds flew lower, circling the unexpected color. Burkina Faso was not just planting seeds, it was planting belief. Radio stations broadcast harvest forecasts. Cooperative leaders shared training tips over WhatsApp. School teachers assigned essays. What would you do with sunflower oil profits? The message was everywhere. This was no longer a pilot. This was real. And then came reveal number 1. A government report confirmed what many dared not hope. Sambai, cero hectares, planted. 100 million sunflowers growing. 5 million tons of seed capacity projected. If the yields held, Burkina Faso could become one of Africa's top 5 sunflower oil producers within 5 years. That number changed everything. Suddenly, global media took notice. Financial analysts ran projections. African economists called it the first serious agro-industrial pivot of the Sahel. And in markets from Accra to Abidjan, importers began asking questions not about whether Burkina Faso could grow, but whether it could compete. But not everyone celebrated. Urban intellectuals rolled their eyes. A field of flowers is not a food policy, sneered one columnist in Ouagadougou. We need grain, not glory. International consultants warned about water. Each sunflower, one report noted, requires irrigation during its early growth. In the Sahel, that's a death sentence. And below those academic concerns, darker worries bubbled to the surface. Could the aquifers survive this kind of extraction? Were boreholes being drilled too fast, too deep? Could the fragile ecology endure another massive agricultural gamble? Memories of past failures resurfaced, grand irrigation projects that dried up or vanished under clouds of corruption. Still, the flowers kept growing. In the countryside, a few shared the skepticism. Women's cooperatives sprang up overnight. Young men hauled water in jerrycans. And everywhere, people whispered the same thing. We didn't think it could happen, but it's happening. One farmer in Yako said, "This land rejected millet. Now it feeds sunflowers. Maybe we were wrong. Maybe we were lied to. But belief is fragile, especially in places where hope has been weaponized." Behind the gold, tension simmered. What if the rains failed? What if the harvest didn't match the hype? What if the factories never came, and the oil left in barrels to foreign ports? And then came the second blow. Not from nature, but from numbers. Traders started visiting villages, quietly, quickly, offering cash up front for seeds. No contracts, no waiting. Just sell, they said, before the government disappoints you. Some farmer did, others hesitated. Rumors swirled of foreign companies preparing bulk deals, locking in prices far below global market rates. It was déjà vu, Africa's old nightmare, producing raw, exporting RAF, and importing it back at double the price. In Ouagadougou, ministers spoke of future factories. But in the bush, the seeds were being sold. Fast, one farmer said bitterly. The oil will leave us before the factories arrive. But even as doubt returned, the golden fields still shimmered. In Kaya, Awa, a mother of 4 stood beside her plot of sunflowers and held a bottle of freshly pressed oil. "We were told we could not feed ourselves," she said, "but I press this with my hands. This is ours." The paradox deepened. The same flower that promised liberation was now attracting the very vultures that had stripped Africa before. A question took root in every conversation, every cooperative, every crowded market stall. Was this the beginning of sovereignty or the start of a new soft colony? Bound, not by soldiers, but by contracts. If you believe this is more than just oil, right, Africa? Rise in the comments below. The sunflowers bloomed. The oil flowed. The dream seemed alive. But in the quiet corners of Burkina Faso, something darker began to stir. It started with whispers, then documents, then undeniable truth. Local journalists leaked what the government wouldn't admit. Foreign corporations from Europe, India, and the Gulf had already signed exclusive contracts to buy Burkina Faso's sunflower oil, not the refined product, the raw seed oil, shipped in tankers, unprocessed, unbranded, unprotected. The deals were struck not in dusty fields, but in 5-star hotels in Ouagadougou. Brokers promised quick development in exchange for long-term rights. But buried in the fine print were poison pills, fixed prices far below global rates. export clauses without processing, non-compete restrictions on local cooperatives. And so it began. Convoys of trucks appeared rumbling down Sahelian highways, not with diesel, but with sunflower oil, golden, fresh, and flowing straight out of the country. Villagers stood by the roadside. Mothers held their children. Some cried, "Our flowers are leaving us." One woman said, "Will they ever return?" At border posts, witnesses counted dozens of tankers a day, crossing into Niger, bound for foreign ports. In markets, prices for oil remained high. In homes, people still cooked with rationed bottles. The wealth was moving but not staying. The betrayal burned. Activists in Ouagadougou held protests. Bottles of oil were labeled "not for sale." University students chanted, "No more crumbs for Africa." One poster read simply, "Flowers of freedom," or "Flowers of theft." The pressure mounted. On state TV, officials denied wrongdoing. "The factories are coming," they claimed. "Be patient." But trust had already started to rot. And then Traoré struck back. In a fiery national address, he threw down the gauntlet. "We will not export our future in barrels," he said. "We will refine it here, package it here, sell it to the world as the pride of Faso." The crowd erupted. But this was no speech alone. Within weeks, bulldozers moved. Steel frames rose. Solar-powered machines were installed. Construction began on 6 large-scale oil refineries in Ouagadougou: Bobo Dioulasso, Kaya, Dori, Tenkodogo, and Fada Ngorma. In parallel, dozens of mini-cooperative-owned presses launched across rural villages. And this time, the people were not just watching, they were building. In Bobo Dioulasso, the first refinery opened by the next harvest. Inside, women in colorful wraps fed seeds into gleaming machines. Out came bottles stamped, "Made in Faso." Reveal number 4 shook the nation. The new factories created over 50 $10 jobs, many for youth and women who had never known formal work. For them, it wasn't just about oil, it was about purpose. "I used to sell peanuts," said Maimouna Arshaliu, a factory technician. "Now I feed the nation." The numbers proved her right. Locally refined oil sold for 3 times the price of raw exports. Within a year, branded shipments landed in French supermarkets, labeled "fair trade," "organic," "African grown." Orders poured in from Germany, India, and China. Burkina Faso had entered the value-added market, and it wasn't begging, it was competing. Still, backlash came fast. European voice questioned quality. "African oil won't last on shelves," claimed one analyst. Indian importers protested the higher prices. Some Gulf investors pulled out. Inside Burkina Faso, opposition politicians fumed over delays and accused the government of favoritism in factory contracts. Traoré responded with fire. They said Africans cannot farm. "We farmed." They said Africans cannot build factories. "We built them." They say we cannot compete. Watch us compete. And the data backed him. Studies from the African Development Bank showed that local processing tripled export value while cutting dependency on volatile global markets. In Sully, a young machine operator said it best. "I used to dream of Europe. Now my dream is here, golden and shining." Not everything was perfect. Power outages slowed output. Corruption murmure persisted. But the shift was undeniable. By the second year of processing, 30% of all sunflower oil was retained for domestic use. Prices dropped. Families cooked freely. Children ate better. And the tankers. They still rolled. But now, they carried refined bottles, stamped with the name of a sovereign people. "We are no longer exporting our future," said Musa, standing beside a vat of fresh oil. "We are refining it, bottling it, and sending it to the world with our name on it." By the 4th harvest, the miracle no longer looked like a miracle. It looked like a system. What began as a desperate gamble had become one of the most formidable agricultural turnarounds on the African continent. Burkina Faso's sunflower revolution, once dismissed as a PR stunt, was now pulling in over $2 billion in annual revenue. The fields still shimmered gold, but this time, behind the beauty, stood cooperatives, refineries, warehouses, trade offices, and schools. A whole economy was blooming, and at the center, the people, Musa, Arshaba, had once packed his bag to cross the Mediterranean, chasing a future in Europe. Today, he operates machines at the Ouagadougou refinery. He speaks in numbers, output per hour, kilograms per press. But behind his stats is pride. I almost drowned for a job I now have here. He says, my children don't see me as a migrant. They see me as a maker. His story is not unique. Thousands of youth, once seduced by exile, stayed. Women, once sidelined in agriculture, rose as factory managers, oil press owners, market distributors. School attendance surged, clinics filled with medicine, villages lit up with solar panels, and the sunflower, that foreign flower, was no longer foreign. It had become African. It had become Faso. Nationally, the impact was undeniable. Dependence on imported cooking oil was over. For the first time, Burkina Faso didn't just feed itself, it exported refined goods with its name on the label. The Ministry of Agriculture declared sunflower oil the country's second largest export, after gold. But unlike gold, the oil stayed in people's hands. Not just elites, not just companies, but communities. Captain Traoré called it sovereignty from the soil. Regionally, the effect was seismic. Mali, Niger, and Chad all launched their own sunflower initiatives. An informal Sahelian sunbelt was emerging, a corridor of gold stretching across nations once known for famine. African cooking oil companies began sourcing directly from Sahelian farmers, bypassing European middlemen. The African Union called it a continental model of resilience. Trade under the African Continental Free Trade Area surged. For the first time in decades, Africa wasn't just supplying raw materials, it was shaping markets. But outside Africa, not everyone applauded. Nigeria, dominant in palm oil, saw the sunflower boom as a threat. India worried about price competition. European refiners, used to cheap Ukrainian supplies, now faced an African alternative with backbone. China, however, moved fast. Delegations signed multi-year agreements. Supermarket shelves in Beijing featured bottles marked Sahel puree. A new axis was forming Africa and Asia, trading not in dependency, but in respect. And yet, no story in the Sahel is free of shadow. In 2030, a brutal drought hit. The rains never came. Crops withered. 15% of the sunflower yield was lost. Prices spiked. Factories slowed. For some, it was proof that the desert always wins. But this time, something was different. The system didn't collapse. Farmers replanted. Cooperatives shared resources. Solar pumps kept irrigation alive. The pain was real, but the infrastructure held. The resilience was not in slogans. It was in planning. Still, dangers remain. Climate change looms. Corruption whispers. Foreign investors watch, waiting for fatigue. And worst of all, there is the risk of believing the work is done. But in the villages, no one makes that mistake. They know the fight is not over. But they also know, for the first time, they are fighting from a place of strength. In Dori, a mother named Awa stares at a field where her children once played with dust. Now they play with butterflies. Between stalks of gold, we used to export hope, she says. Now we bottle it. And we label it with our name. Burkina Faso, once a land of cracked soil and forgotten futures, now teaches the world how to grow dignity. But the question remains, can this golden revolution survive the storms to come? Or will the Sahel bloom only to wither again? 100 million sunflowers. That's how it began, a number so audacious. It bordered on madness. In the burning sands of the Sahel, where millet barely survives and wells dry by noon, they dared to plant a golden dream. And somehow, against reason and ridicule, the flowers stood tall. But this story, your story, is about more than flowers. Nationally, Burkina Faso took cracked soil and grew sovereignty. No longer just a source of raw goods, it now bottles and exports its own future. Oil no longer comes from ships, it comes from Faso. Regionally, the Sahel rose from the ashes of dependency. From Mali to Chad, the golden wave spread, forging a new identity, not of famine, but of resilience. Africa began to feed Africa. Globally, the map changed. European markets made room. Asia leaned closer. Trade routes shifted. The world, long addicted to the east for sunflower oil, looked west to West Africa. And yet, the desert remembers. The droughts will come. Corruption will knock. Foreign hands still reach for what they never planted. A storm always waits beyond the sun. So now, the last question is yours. Will these fields, these flowers, remain the miracle we made together? Or will they become another tale of what could have been? Because this time, the ending is not written in Europe, not in Delhi, not in Paris. It will be written in the Sahel. If you believe this truth matters, drop a comment below and write Africa Rise. Let the world know we are not done. We are just beginning. If this report unveils a hidden truth for you, don't just scroll past. Share or comment to ensure it's not buried. Like, share, speak, subscribe because they hid our history long enough. Let's speak our future out loud. Thanks for coming. See you in the next video for news analysis, the truth they don't want you to know.